History tells us Patrice Lumumba was liquidated because he was a communist threat. But a deep dive audit into declassified CIA and Belgian intelligence files reveals a far more chilling reality. It wasn't about ideology. It was about Shinkolobwe, the richest uranium mine on the planet. This was the source of the fuel that leveled Hiroshima. To the Western powers, Lumumba wasn't a statesman. He was a man standing on top of the world's most dangerous pile of money. And in 1961, the authorization for a corporate hit was signed. The objective? Total control of the supply chain. At any cost. But this story doesn't begin in a boardroom. It begins in the dark earth of the Congo. Deep beneath the jungle floor lies Shinkolobwe, a mine like no other. It doesn't yield gold or diamonds. It yields something far more valuable and infinitely more deadly. It was the atomic fuel that changed the course of the 20th century, and the reason the world's superpowers would stop at nothing to control it. The uranium that leveled Hiroshima, the bomb that ended the war and claimed over 100,000 lives, was pulled from these very tunnels. The uranium that built America's nuclear arsenal? It came from here. The uranium that tipped the scales of the entire Cold War? It was born in this deep, dark pit. This wasn't just a mine, it was the engine room of the nuclear age. In 1960, the Congo shed its colonial shackles to claim independence. But one man refused to play by the old rules. Patrice Lumumba stood before the world and declared, "This wealth belongs to the Congolese people. Not to foreign corporations. Not to the CIA. Not to Belgium. To us." It was a declaration of ownership that sent shockwaves through the highest corridors of Western power. At just 35 years old, he was the face of a new Africa. But his belief in true Congolese sovereignty, his insistence that the nation's immense riches should benefit its own people, was seen as a mortal threat. In the high-stakes game of global resource control, his vision was a crime that the West simply could not forgive. On June 30, 1960, the Congo finally declared its independence from Belgium. It was the end of 80 years of colonial rule, a regime so profoundly brutal that it had claimed millions of lives. The weight of that history hung heavy in the air. The Congolese people were finally free, but the world they were stepping into was already closing in around them, eyes fixed firmly on the wealth beneath their feet.
If you think this corporate web is getting complicated, we're just getting started. If you're enjoying this deep dive investigation into the hidden audits of history, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep these files open.
In his landmark Independence Day speech, Lumumba delivered a blistering, unfiltered critique of colonialism. He spoke of the humiliating bondage that had defined the era, fearlessly denouncing the systemic exploitation that had enriched Belgium while systematically stripping the Congolese people of their humanity, their labor, and their future. It was a truth that refused to be silenced, and it was heard clearly in every capital that stood to lose from a truly independent Congo. His words ignited a wildfire of pride across the African continent, a symbol of long-awaited defiance. But in the corridors of power, in Brussels, London, and Washington, those same words ignited pure, cold fury. They didn't see a leader speaking for his people, they saw a threat to the global order. The gears of the corporate hit began to turn in the shadows, fueled by the panic of those who realized their hold on the Congo's wealth was slipping away. The reason for the hostility was simple. The Congo was, and remains, one of the richest nations on Earth. Its mineral wealth is estimated at a staggering $24 trillion. It holds the world's largest reserves of cobalt, the lifeblood of our modern smartphones and electric vehicles, alongside vast, untapped deposits of copper, diamonds, and gold, not to mention the very uranium that once defined the balance of power during the Cold War. At the heart of this extraction machine sat Union Minière du Haut-Katanga, a Belgian mining titan with tentacles deep in the colonial bedrock. This was no ordinary company, it was a state within a state. It held the keys to the Shinkolobwe uranium, the sprawling copper belts of Katanga, and every railroad and port needed to ship that wealth to the west. If you controlled the Congo's resources, Union Minière owned the map. Union Minière had extracted billions from the Congo's soil. Their wealth was built on a foundation of absolute control. So, when Lumumba threatened to nationalize those mines, to redirect the flow of profit back to the Congolese people, the company didn't just see a policy change. They saw an existential threat to their empire. To them, the independence of the Congo was an intolerable disruption to the greatest profit machine of the 20th century. The coalition against Lumumba was a shadow state alliance. First, the Belgian government, holding a massive, direct stake in Union Minière's success. Then the CIA, which painted Lumumba as a Soviet pawn to justify a Cold War intervention, despite his clear neutrality. Finally, a ruthless network of white settlers and hired mercenaries, determined to carve away the mineral-rich province of Katanga. This was a convergence of corporate greed, imperial desperation, and Cold War paranoia. By July 1960, a mere weeks after the birth of the nation the knife was twisted. Katanga seceded from the Congo. This wasn't a grassroots rebellion. It was a surgical operation orchestrated directly from Brussels and the boardrooms of Union Minière. At its helm was Moi Tambe, a hand-picked puppet placed on a throne to ensure the mineral wealth of the region stayed firmly under foreign lock and key. Lumumba was effectively trapped. With the Katangan secession hemorrhaging the nation's wealth, he turned to the United Nations for help. They refused. The West abandoned him. With his country falling apart, he reached out to the only power willing to assist, the Soviet Union. To Lumumba, it was a desperate, tactical necessity, a move for survival. But in the halls of Washington and Brussels, it was instantly framed as the ultimate ideological betrayal. Lumumba's real crime wasn't communism, it wasn't radicalism. It was the simple, dangerous belief that the Congo should belong to the Congolese. That a nation's children should reap the harvest of their own land, their own labor, and their own wealth. It was an affront to the global extraction machine, a claim to sovereignty that demanded a price. And for that defiance, the decision was made, he would have to die.
Before we look at the CIA's specific solution for Lumumba, I want to hear from Time Recall's jury. Do you think a corporation should ever have this much power over a sovereign nation? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading every one.
In August 1960, a cable marked Top Secret hit the CIA station in Leopoldville. The message was chillingly brief. It read, "We conclude that his removal must be an urgent and prime objective." No mention of diplomacy. No talk of peace. The order was clear, the target identified, Patrice Lumumba. The corporate hit was no longer a theory. It was now a signed, authorized, and active operation. The directive came from the highest level of the American executive. President Eisenhower had given the order. CIA Director Allen Dulles had approved the methodology. The target wasn't a combatant in a war zone, he was a democratically elected prime minister. In the name of stability, and in the defense of the $24 trillion prize, the objective was clear, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. The CIA didn't just want him gone, they wanted him erased. They launched Operation Wizard. Agents debated poisoning his personal belongings, even his own toothpaste. They funneled bribes to parliamentarians to rot his support from within. When that wasn't enough, they flipped his own security chief, Colonel Joseph Desire Mobutu. A former ally, turned into a puppet, tasked with the final act of the coup. September 1960. Mobutu strikes. With the CIA's backing, the military coup is solidified, and Lumumba is taken. He is arrested, dragged, and beaten, a humiliating parade of violence. But the final, deadliest phase is the transfer. Under the cold, watchful eye of Western operatives, he is flown directly into the hands of his most vicious enemies, the secessionist government of Katanga. They didn't just arrest him, they delivered him to his executioners. January 17, 1961. The charade of government was over. Lumumba was driven deep into the Katangan wilderness to a remote, silent location. He was led to a single, solitary tree, a place chosen for its seclusion away from the eyes of the world. It was a site that would become a grave, a site that would mark the final, bloody victory of the extraction machine. His final words, defiant until the end, were simply, "You are killing Africa." He was 35. But the cruelty didn't end with his execution. His body was dissolved in acid, erased by those who feared his memory. A Belgian officer even kept a tooth as a grotesque souvenir. That bone, a chilling symbol of colonial arrogance, would not be returned to his grieving family until 2022. 61 years of silence, finally broken. In his final letter, Lumumba wrote, "I prefer to die with my head held high, with unshakable faith in the destiny of my country." He was murdered, but his vision was suppressed by the regime that followed. Mobutu, the man the CIA helped install, ruled for 32 years of systematic plunder. He looted $5 billion, leaving a nation of immense wealth mired in poverty. The stability the West demanded had been bought at the cost of a nation's soul. The Congo descended into decades of dictatorship, civil war, and relentless extraction. Over 4 million lives were lost in the fallout. The promise of independence was stolen, the future was forfeited. Lumumba wasn't martyred for being a radical, he was executed for the radical act of believing the Congo's wealth belonged to its people. To the corporations and the powers that controlled the mines, that wasn't just a political stance. It was an unforgivable crime. Today, the Congo remains a land of paradox, one of the richest nations on earth, yet one of the poorest. While its mineral wealth sits at a staggering $24 trillion, the average citizen survives on less than $2 a day. The extraction continues. 75% of the industry remains in foreign hands, the direct descendants of the colonial era, the same entities that backed the coup. The names may have changed, but the machine is the same. The extraction has not stopped. It has only been refined. The cobalt in your smartphone, the copper in your computer, the coltan in your electric vehicle, they aren't just parts. They are pieces of a story written in blood. The minerals that fuel our modern world come predominantly from the Congo. But who really benefits? Not the Congolese people. It is the foreign corporations, the banks, the tech giants, and the defense contractors. The same forces that killed Lumumba in 1961 are the same forces extracting the wealth of his nation today. Lumumba's nightmare persists, a cycle of extraction and instability. But the silence is finally breaking. In 2026, 65 years after the assassination, a Belgian diplomat stood trial for his role in the crime. His granddaughter, Yema Lumumba, captured the spirit of a new generation when she declared, "We will never stop seeking the truth and for justice." The story of the Congo is no longer just one of theft, it is now, finally, one of reckoning. In 2022, a gold tooth, the only remains of a visionary, was finally returned home. A small, singular gesture, yet a tectonic shift in history. Patrice Lumumba was murdered for a simple, dangerous conviction that the riches of the Congo belong, by right, to the Congolese. That was his crime in the eyes of the machine. That, the fight for dignity and sovereignty, is the legacy for which he will be remembered forever.
The Lumumba hit was a blueprint for corporate interference. To see how the same playbook was used by fruit companies in Central America, click here to watch the banana conspiracy audit next.